Oh, what's up?
You gonna do it sideways?
Yeah, inshallah, because the charger's over here. I don't want my phone to die in the middle of it. Should be good.
Alright. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah amma ba'd. So inshallah tonight the topic is we can say attaining khushu' or sweetness in prayer. Don't worry about the nomenclature of the topic. Inshallah, you'll see what it is. Really, it is to try and get as much as possible out of the prayer. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that some people pray and all they get is like 1/5 of the prayer, or 1/6 of the prayer, or 1/10 of the prayer. So a lot of people don't get what they need to get out of the prayer. Yes, they might do the movements, it might look like a prayer, it appears like a prayer, but they're not really benefiting from the prayer. They're not getting the fruits of the prayer. So what can we do to maximize that prayer experience so that we get as much as possible out of the prayer? So what I'm going to do today, inshallah, I'm going to kind of divide the topic into different steps or different phases. First, let's look at what we do before the prayer. How can we prepare for the prayer? And also, what is our perception of the prayer anyways? What is our perception of salat? And then we'll go into the actual preparation, and then we'll go inside the prayer and see what can we do in the prayer in order to improve our salat. So first, there is a rather, unfortunately, a common perception that salat is a chore, like something we have to do, something that we might be forced to do. And I'm not saying everybody is like that, but some people have this perception that, oh, and I have to pray Dhuhr. Oh, I still have to pray. I haven't prayed Asr. I have to do it. And it sounds like a chore. It sounds like something that you have to do. If we look at how the Prophet ﷺ perceived the prayer, is really a totally different paradigm. Like it's a paradigm shift. If we can change our perception of the prayer and see how the Prophet ﷺ looked at it, then inshallah we would be looking forward. We would be anticipating, eager to start the prayer. So in one narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, and he basically was addressing Bilal. Bilal was, who was Bilal? What relationship he had with the prayer? What was he?
He was the Mustayas Muazzin.
He was a mu'adhin, right? He was calling, he would call the prayer. He would call to the prayer, one of the mu'adhin of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet would talk to him, would address him, and he would say, Arihna ya Bilal bis-salat. Arihna ya Bilal bis-salat. Like, oh Bilal, relieve us with the prayer. Okay? So the way the Prophet ﷺ looked at the prayer, he looked at it as like a refuge from all the problems of life. All of us have problems, right? And you're stressed out, and there's so many issues you have to deal with, even when you're young. It's not just school, maybe there's some family issues and friends, bullying you or whatever, and you're just not happy with whatever is happening around you. So the Prophet ﷺ would look at the prayer as like a shelter from all of this, as a place of refuge. Like you basically resort to salat. Salat is like this resting time. It's like you're taking this recess out of this daily, busy work. So this is what he told Bilal, Arihna, like, oh please Bilal, start the prayer and give us this relief. They give us this respite from all that busy work, all of the daily issues we deal with. So if we look at the prayer as this time, it's like time off. Like, some people deal with that in different ways. Like a lot of people drink because they want to run away from all the stress, all the pressure, because they want to take their mind away from everything else. unfortunately, they resort to drinking because, yes, of course, you lose your mind for a bit. But here, there's a way to lose just the problems, the trouble, and just have this moment of tranquility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Indeed, by the mention of Allah, the hearts will feel tranquility. It will feel calm and peace. So this is definitely our goal. Even if it is not like this today, your prayer may not be like that, but this is our goal, that the prayer becomes this time we look for. It's a time we are like, we can't wait until we get to, because it's a seclusion, it's a shelter from all the daily problems. In a different hadith, very similar actually, the Prophet also said, alayhi وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. What does that mean? This word قُرَّةُ عَيْن, you might see it in the Quran also. هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ, right? If you know the Quran, the Surah, Al-Furqan. At the end of Surah Al-Furqan, you make this dua, oh Allah, make my kids قُرَّةَ أَعْيُن. It's a plural of قُرَّةُ عَيْن. So قُرَّةُ الْعَيْن is, if you're looking at something and you like it so much. I don't know if some people are into art, maybe they look at some work of art, like maybe a nice mountain tree, whatever, or you go to hike in nature. Sometimes your eyes fall upon something and you like it so much you don't want to move your eyes away from it. That is Qurrat al-Ayn. If you want to translate Qurrat al-Ayn, that's what it is. So Qurrat al-Ayn is like when your eye settles on something and you don't want to move away from it. You don't want to look anywhere else because you're so happy, you have so much joy just by looking at something. So that is Qurratul Ayn. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ viewed prayer. He said, the settlement of my eye was put in salat, was made in salat. Like the joy of my eye, the pleasure of my eye is put in salat. So we also look at salat as a time of settlement. You settle, you relax, right? It's a time where, and unfortunately sometimes you see people do the opposite. When they pray so quickly. It's totally the opposite of being, tranquil and calm and taking this time of rest. So this is definitely something we want to start with, how we perceive Salat. It is a time of, it's a time out from all the life and its problems, all the issues we have, and just having a few moments with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Indeed, the word Salah itself is derived from the word Sila. So one of the meanings of Salat is Sila. And Sila is like a connection. Because here, you're striving to have a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also Salat has also some root in the word, dua. Yusalli alayh also could mean to actually make dua. Regardless, Sila is definitely one of the meanings, and it means establishing that connection. So this is also a time where you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So now if you have that mindset before you approach the prayer, right? Now you have a good start. But that's not it. There's a lot to be done, right? Before the prayer and during the prayer to make the prayer better and to have this sweetness and khushu'. First is wudu. So wudu, you think, why was wudu even legislated? Why do we even have wudu? Wudu is to prepare us for salat. And a lot of people don't pay attention to that. They make it so quickly and they don't do it properly. And that, they don't realize that affects salat. It affects the quality of salat. If your wudu is bad, your salat will be bad as well, or it won't be as good. So we have to pay attention to wudu. And a few things about wudu. I'm not here to teach you wudu or how to make wudu, but a few things I'll mention. One is the issue of, or the process of isbagh wudu. Some people may not be familiar with that. So this is mentioned in the hadith, and the Prophet said in that hadith, ﷺ, he said, isbagh al-wudu'i ala al-makarih. So isbagh is basically to make sure that the water runs over the entire member that you're washing. Right? So for example, if you're washing the arm, you make sure that so isbagh is this process of making sure that water is running and touching every part of the skin. Because some people do it so quickly and they wash, maybe they use lots of water, but it doesn't wash the entire arm. So they leave maybe some part of the arm unwashed. Not only will that invalidate your wudu, but also take away from the experience of salah. Because you rushed through the wudu and you didn't do it properly. There's several hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says that part of making salat good is to make ihsan in wudu. Make ihsan. So ihsan is mastery, is perfection when you make wudu. And it says in the hadith, ala al-makarih. So ala al-makarih means in times of difficulty. And maybe in the winter you understand that if you're outside maybe camping and have to make wudu and it's like freezing cold, that is makarih. So the Prophet is saying ﷺ here, despite the fact that it is hard to make wudu because it's too cold and the water is not heated, you're not home, you're not in the luxury of using hot water, despite this fact, they take their time, okay? They take their time in making sure that water is properly, rubbed through the arm or through the face, and you're not missing any part. One time, some of the companions were rushing through wudu, and they were washing their feet so quickly that they were missing the back of the feet, the heel, right? They were missing the heel, al-aqib. And the Prophet ﷺ noticed that from afar, and he said, "Waylun lil-aqabi min an-nar." Beware, be careful, if you don't wash the feet, beware the heels and the fire, as a form of warning. So basically, you want to make sure that you take a bit more time in making wudu. That's all it takes. And some people think, well, I want to make sure that water is, being, rubbed properly, and they waste a lot of water. That's not the idea. You can do proper wudu with so little water. And some scholars have estimated how much is needed, and some say like maybe a small little bottle of water is enough, maybe a handful. If you use water properly, you don't need more than that. So it's not about the quantity. You don't want to squander so much water. Rather, it's about taking a bit more time to make sure that water is applied properly to the places of wudu, to the parts of wudu. So that is wudu. Another thing quickly about wudu before we go to salah. Wudu is not just washing the body. It's not like taking a shower. It's not like, washing the face or the hands or something like that. Wudu is an act of worship. And the reason it is so, not only because it's a condition for salat, but also because when you wash the members of wudu, all your sins will drop. So this does not happen if you're just washing your face when you wake up in the morning, or you wash your hands before you eat, right? Those are not acts of worship in that sense. But when you make wudu, it's an act of worship. So this is why when you wash the face, all the sins you committed with your face, like looking at somebody you're not supposed to look at, something you're not supposed to look at, or you use your tongue in some backbiting or something like that. So when you wash your mouth, you wash your face, all the sins that were committed with those organs will fall. That's what the hadith said. So in a way, you are washing your sins when you make wudu. Okay? So when you make wudu, and essentially, you are washing yourself from the sins you've committed. And usually, and you wonder, like, why do we wash what we wash? Those are the face, the hands, the feet are usually the organs we use in committing sins. Right? Like, you don't usually use your back so the face, because you have all the important faculties like the hearing, the eyesight, the tongue, right? So you wash those. The hands, because we act with our hands. The feet, because you might walk to something haram or to a haram place, whatever. So you look at wudu as an act of worship because it's a process of cleansing yourself physically and spiritually from the sins that you've committed. Okay. Now we move into the prayer. So a few things about the prayer as we enter the prayer before we go into the specific acts. couple of things you want to be in, like a couple of moods or mindsets you need to have when you come into prayer, as much as possible. You try. One is humility, and one is some type of fear. We'll talk about those in more detail, but keep those in mind. And some translations, for example, you see khushu', the word khushu', it's used a lot, so we're going to talk about that, what it means. But in English, maybe the best, translation or the closest one is this mix of humility and awe. So awe is more like, what is needed, not necessarily fear, but it's like this awe. But in order to do that, you might say these are like abstracts. I don't understand what you mean by awe. I don't understand what you mean by humility, right? How can you exhibit humility when you pray? You might exhibit humility when you talk to somebody, for example, so you're not arrogant, you're not proud. But can I exhibit humility as I pray? So a few things you're gonna do. It's basically a mix of physical acts and non-physical acts. And you cannot rely on one without the other, so you need both. A couple of things that are really important as you enter the prayer, and those are examined or observed throughout the prayer. One is the fact that you are focused in one place. If you're looking around, right, you're not going to be able to have this khushu'. You're not going to be able to enjoy the prayer. And unfortunately, you see some people do that. So they enter the prayer, but they're looking around. Or somebody entered the masjid, they have to see who it is, right? If you do that, you're not going to have khushu'. You're not going to have this focus in prayer at all. And scholars have mentioned different animals that you're not supposed to imitate in the prayer. One of them is a Salah, the fox. Because the fox looks around a lot, right? So you should not be looking around like the fox. Okay? So just focus, and the easiest thing is to focus on the floor where you make sujood. It really helps if you just focus on one place. Some of the scholars used to say if you see somebody like moving a lot during the prayer, like some people might be like restless, they can't like focus or can't even stand still, they say that this tells me that his heart is not, focused. Because the members reflect the heart. Like your limbs reflect the heart, the state of the heart. So if the heart is not, tranquil and focused and does not have this khushu', then the limbs also will not be able to have that. So it's really connected. So one thing is, don't move as much as possible. Try and stand still. And the other thing is, that helps a lot is, and everybody can do it. Everybody prays at a certain speed, right? So some of us might be very fast, some of us might be kind of, medium speed, and so on. Everyone can dial it down a little bit. So I want you, like the next prayer you pray, just slow it down a little bit. So if you go really fast, you can slow it down. Even if you don't go fast, very fast, but you go a bit fast, slow it down a little bit. Which means, if you go to ruku', instead of spending, let's say, you spend maybe 10 seconds, some people, or 30 seconds, spend like a minute. Imam Bukhari was famous for this. He used to make long ruku'. And some people say, or think that ruku' has to be fast. Like as soon as they go to ruku', they haven't even settled yet. They immediately rise. They immediately go up again. And this actually, according to many scholars, is not even valid. Like it might invalidate your prayer if you're not sitting still in each position of the prayer. So if you're in ruku', but your back hasn't settled yet, and you immediately go up, then they say this ruku' is not acceptable. Because in every position of the prayer, you're supposed to spend some time. You're supposed to be settled, like every bone goes to its position and does not move to the next one until like everything has settled. And they're common places. Ruku' is one of them. The other one is between the two sajda. Some people do it so fast. So they don't sit between the two sajda. They barely sit. Immediately they go to the second sujood. So that's not correct. In fact, this is something that could invalidate the prayer. Because they think, well, sajda is important, but what's in between is not. Like it's a rest, right? So it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. It does matter. So you have to sit, take some time. Even if you don't know what dua to say, that's fine. Just settle. And then go to the second sujood. This will improve your prayer dramatically. Just those small little things you add to the prayer. Also, there is another animal we're not supposed to imitate, which is, I think, the rooster, because the pecking of the rooster, right? If you observe a rooster or a chicken when they eat, right? How they peck, the food, the grain, whatever. They do it so quickly. Some people pray like that. So there's a prohibition from imitating the pecking of the rooster. Okay, so these are like some observations that to look for in the entire prayer. So number one is that you try and settle, not move a lot, and focus on the one place. Like place of sujood is the best, right? Or where you make ruku' or something, the place of the sujood. And the second thing is, like I said, to slow down a little bit. Okay. Now, so let's look at the main parts of the prayer. We call them arkan. So the prayer is composed of 3 types of actions. You have a rukun, which is a pillar. So the pillar, if you miss, your prayer is completely gone. You cannot pray sujood sahwi. Either you have to make it up, that rukun you missed, or you have to repeat the entire prayer. So for example, if somebody forgot ruku', so you're in Fatiha, you finished, you recited another surah, and for some reason you forgot to go to ruku', you immediately went to sujood. What do you do in that case? You can't say, well, okay, that's fine, it's already too late, I'm already in sujood, I'll pray sujood sahwi at the end. You cannot do that. Because ruku' is a pillar of salat. What you do is, as soon as you remember, you go back and make ruku'. Whatever you missed, you go back to that you missed. And you complete from that point. So if you missed ruku' and you're in sujood, you remember, you get up and do ruku'. Because whatever you did in between doesn't count. Anything you did after the Fatiha, right? Because you missed ruku', anything after ruku' doesn't count. Because ruku' is a pillar. The second level is the wajibat. These are not pillars, but they are must. They are necessary. We call them wajibat. Those, if you miss, then you pray sujood as-sahw. For example, the tahiyyat you do in the middle. So if you were in the second rak'ah, and you're supposed to sit for tahiyyat, but you forgot and you got up for the third rak'ah. And then in the third rak'ah, you remember that you missed tahiyyat. Because tahiyyat is not a pillar, it's only wajib, so it is mandatory, but it is not a pillar of salat, you don't go back to tahiyyat. You continue, and then at the end you pray the 2 extra sujood. These we call sujood as-sahw, the sajda of forgetfulness. And then the third type of activity in the salat is as-sunnah. Things that are recommended, but they're not mandatory. Those, if you forget, there's nothing you have to do. There's nothing upon you. You just continue, and there's no problem. Alright? So, for example, if somebody forgot to recite a surah after Surah Al-Fatiha in the first 2 rak'ah, that is a sunnah. So, if you forget it, you lose. If you do it on purpose, you lose some ajr. But if you forget about it and then later you remember, there's nothing to do. There's nothing that you have to do. Okay, so at least now we understand the types of activities in the prayer. So we're going to focus on the rukuns because those are the pillars of the salah. So how can we improve those arkan? So the arkan we're going to focus on that are really the pillars of salat. They're the Fatiha, right? Ruku' and sujood. So those three arkan pillars, we have to approach them a little differently so we can improve the experience of salat. So Fatiha, how do we perceive Fatiha? Well, Fatiha is both a dua. Some people don't think of it as a dua, they think of it as a surah. But it is also a conversation between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we can embody that, if we could live that experience like I am speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Surah Al-Fatiha. And the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith, he illustrated that. He said, and this is by the way hadith Qudsi, it's like Allah speaking to us. Alright? And he said, قُسِمَتِ الصَّلَاةُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِ وَصْفَيْنِ. He said the prayer has been divided between me, so Allah speaking, the prayer has been divided between me and my servant into two parts. And notice he said salat. But here he's talking about Fatiha. Because Fatiha is so important in our salat, he called it salat. It's like when the Prophet said, Al-Hajj Arafah. He said, Hajj is Arafah. Arafah is not everything in Hajj. You do other things in Hajj, right? You do Tawaf, you go Mina, you do the Jamarat. But because Arafah is so important and standing on the Mount of Arafah is so important, he said, Hajj is Arafah. Like, this is it. Like, this is the main pillar of Hajj. Likewise, here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Fatiha is Salah. And it is the most important part of Salah. So he said the Salat, which means Al-Fatiha, has been divided between Allah, between me, because Allah speaking, and my servant. So when my servant says, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, when you say the first ayah, or the second ayah, if you're Shafi'i, if you believe Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is an ayah, doesn't matter. When he said, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Allah will say, Hamidani Abdi. My servant had praised me. When you say, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And when you say, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allah will say, Athna alayya Abdi. And Athna means to praise me again, from Thana. And from Tathniya. Tathniya, if you know Arabic, is like a pair, or when you have a double, right? So because you praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala twice. So when you say Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, you are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again, right? After you praise Him by saying Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And then Maliki Yawmiddin, Allah will say Majjadani Abdi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, my servant has glorified me or has extolled me. Tamjeed. And then you say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, هَذَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي. This is between me and my servant. Right? Because it's kind of a secret. When you say, it is you that I worship, no one knows except you and Allah. If you mean it, if you are truthful about it, if you're sincere about it. So this is like something between you and Allah. And then the rest, so this is like kind of half of the surah. The other half of the surah is just a dua. You say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide me or guide us to the straight path. So really, all you're doing in the beginning when you are glorifying Allah and praising Allah and extolling Allah, it's like a preparation to make that dua. Because you're not supposed to jump into dua directly, like right away. It's inappropriate. Because when you speak to Allah, initially you have to praise Him, and then you make the dua. You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after you praise Him. So you spend half of the surah praising Allah in preparation to make dua in the second half. Alright? Now it must be a great dua because we have to make all that preparation, and because it is the core of salat, and because we do it in every rak'ah of salat. This is like the most important dua you ever make in your life. And a lot of people don't even think of it as a dua. Like when I ask you, like, what is a dua you remember? You start thinking, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. But you don't think of this dua. This is the most important dua because you repeat it in every salat and every rak'ah. And what is the content of that dua? Very basic. Guide me. That's all you're asking. And some Muslim, philosopher, like they want to philosophize, they say, oh, I'm already guided. Why do I need to make this dua? SubhanAllah. We all need guided every minute in our lives. Just because you're Muslim doesn't mean you're guided completely. Yes, you're guided to the basics, right? You know Islam is true, good. But you need guidance in everything in life. Every decision you make, you're not sure if it is the right decision or not. Every day we make so many decisions. Small ones, big ones, major ones. So asking Allah for guidance, you're not just asking for like this, general guidance that you find the right religion. No, this is part of it. But there's so many things in life where you need guidance. Any kind of decision you're making, whether related to religion, Islam, or it is related to your daily life. So it is a very, very important dua, and it's so essential to our life because without it, we're misguided. We can make lots of terrible decisions. So this is how we look at Fatiha. Fatiha is really a gateway to basically summon the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to get the guidance of Allah, to receive the guidance of Allah, so that our decisions are made with the light of Allah, so that our decisions hopefully are good and correct and not, causing so much havoc in our lives. So this is Al-Fatiha, and when you read this dua, it's not just guide us to the straight path, but also it explains what the path is and which path we follow, the path of the prophets, and which path we don't follow. So it gives us lots of intuition and insight into what kind of path we are pursuing. So this is one rukn. And if we perceive Al-Fatiha as a conversation between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah it will improve our prayer experience. Let's talk a bit about ruku'. So ruku', if you notice, it's bowing. That's what ruku' is, right? And bowing is not like foreign to other cultures or other people. You notice, some people when they salute others, they bow, especially in the Oriental culture, right? So bowing has some meaning, has some significance. Usually it means paying respect, right? Or even there is an element of fear. So for example, in the past, people used to bow to kings, right? So it is a form of basically respect, fear, and submission also. Like you're submitting yourself to the one you're bowing to. Obviously in Islam, we only bow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's a complete bowing. So you don't just bow a little bit and you get up, or some people, like in some cultures, when they bow to like a king or a president, whatever, they bow a little bit. Our bowing is complete. This is why you're supposed to be like this, like your back is horizontal. So it's a complete bowing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the feeling you should have, the mood or what do you think about when you make ruku'? It's basically the feeling of khushu'. And there's a hadith actually that says when you are in ruku', if you want to add to your tasbih, like you say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, you can add a statement that says khasha'a qalbi wa sam'i wa basari. So basically you're saying that all my organs are committing khushu' or making khushu'. So the word khushu' also is a bit ambiguous. Some people don't know what khushu' is. It's hard to explain. But one element of khushu', if you want to understand it, is mentioned in the Quran. In Surah Taha, I think, right? وَخَشَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this word khushu' and it says وَخَشَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ فَلَا تَسْمَعُ إِلَّا هَمْسًا. So this gives us an idea what khushu' is. And here it says, on the Day of Judgment, when people are in the presence of Allah, everybody will be quiet. So it says, وَخَشَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ فَلَا تَسْمَعُ إِلَّا هَمْسًا. Everybody, so it would be like, imagine a lot of commotion, and then when they perceive or see the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everybody will quiet down. And you only hear whispering. So even the people who are talking now, all of a sudden, their voices will lower out of respect and fear and awe from the presence of Allah. So that is an understanding of khushu'. وَخَشَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتِ. So this khushu' is happening to your voice here. Because what's happening to your voice, you're speaking out loud and all of a sudden now, you lower your voice. وَخَشَعَتِ الْأَصْوَاتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ فَلَا تَسْمَعُ إِلَّا هَمْسًا. All you can hear is whisper. You can no longer hear like people shouting or speaking loudly and so on. So khushu' is about quieting down, it's about lowering your, like all these noises, and also it's a process that happens through the whole body. So your eyes can do khushu', your hearing can do khushu', your heart can do khushu'. It's a similar process. It's basically quieting down in the presence of something great. So that is the essence of ruku'. Now, sujood is the other major pillar in salat. And the essence of sujood is basically humiliation. But humiliation in the right sense. Humiliation for Allah, for God. Obviously, you put your nose, right? The most noble part of your body, your forehead, your nose. You put them on the ground, on the dirt even, if you're out in the open, right? So you put those parts which are perceived as the height of your honor and dignity. You put them on the floor, and this is why some people like in Mecca who were like arguing with the Prophet ﷺ, they might have liked some aspects of the prayer, but some other parts they would never do. For example, they said, I would never put my nose on the ground. And they would pick like a piece of dirt, and they said, we're willing to bring the dirt to us, but we're not willing to bring the nose to the ground. So they really understood the meaning of sujood, because it does have a lot of humiliation, to put your face on the ground. But because you're doing it for the sake of Allah, and you're doing it for Allah, obviously it turns it around, makes it such a noble act. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet ﷺ said, أَقْرَبُ مَا يَكُونُ الْعَبْدُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ وَهُوَ سَاجِدٌ. The closest you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when you are making sujood. Because the more you humble yourself to Allah, the closer you are to Allah. And Allah loves people who are humble, who have humility. Right? So he said, this is why you want to make a lot of dua in the place of sujood, because you're so close to Allah, because you humble yourself and you put your face on the ground. This is the time to make dua, because Allah will respond. فَإِنَّهُ قَمِنٌ أَنْ يُسْتَجَابَ لَكُمْ, he said. It's likely, and it's very likely and worthy that Allah will answer your dua. Okay. I really want to give time for a discussion, hopefully a conversation, and maybe some questions. But let me end with a few examples from our prestigious fast, from our noble, great fast. I'll maybe mention 3 examples of people who, in my opinion, they have lived the ideal of the prayer. They really understood the prayer, and they exemplified the khushu' and the attention and the focus in prayer like no one else. The first example is Abbad bin Bishr. So this was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, maybe not very known. A lot of people may not know who Abbad bin Bishr is, right? But this man, at one time, he was guarding the camp of the Muslims. Muslims were out on an expedition or something, and they were camping at night. And usually you appoint few guards, right? Because the enemy could attack you, so you need some people to keep an eye. So this man was guarding, and you might have few guards on each side of the camp. So this man was guarding one side of the camp. And it so happened that one of the enemies came from his side. So only him was in between. And before the enemy came, before that enemy came, Abbad bin Bishr thought, well, I'm guarding anyways, right? I'm up, I'm not asleep. Might as well use my time and pray. This is how they thought of prayer, like this is a good use of my time. So Abbad bin Bishr started to pray, and as he prayed, that man who came from afar aimed at Abbad bin Bishr with his arrow, and he shot Abbad in his leg. And Abbad was enjoying the prayer so much, he continued to pray. And it happened twice, and a third time, and Abbad was bleeding. Now Abbad also entertained exiting the prayer, not because he wanted to finish his salat and take care of his wound, but because he was afraid the enemy will attack, the camp. So I think it was Ammar bin Yasir or someone else in the camp that he woke up and then they discovered that he was bleeding. So they scolded him like, "Why didn't you wake us up earlier?" And by the way, this hadith became an interesting hadith of fiqh, because scholars were debating if bleeding will invalidate your wudu. But they missed the bigger part, which is the fact that this man was taking all this pain while praying. And that's to me more interesting than whether the blood will invalidate your wudu or not. But it's obvious that it does not. And now some might say, well, but the Prophet was not around, ﷺ, so maybe Abbad did not know that the blood will invalidate. But the response is easy. We say that Allah saw that, and He could have informed the Prophet ﷺ, because he wouldn't leave anything like this without being, pointed out. Anyway, so this is an example of someone who loved the prayer so much and was so much focused on the prayer that even arrows being shot to his leg did not stop him or cause him to exit the prayer. And now you wonder, what? Think of the things that would take you away from the prayer and see how lame they are, like maybe a game or Fortnite, whatever. Right? But subhanAllah, this man, he took all this pain. He did not want to exit the prayer until he was complete, he was done. And the other example is Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He's also a companion. He's from the younger companions, because his father was also a companion, as Zubayr ibn Awwam. And this man was an example of standing and sitting still in the prayer. To a point they would say, if he was making ruku or sujood, it would take so long and we'd be so still that birds would come and land on his back, thinking that he's a rock or a tree. This is how focused he was on the salat and how much time he took on salat. And he was not wobbling like we do sometimes all the time, and restless like he was scratching. Some people, when you pray next to them, you wonder, all the time they're scratching their eyes, their face, their head. Are you even paying attention to anything? They're so restless. So this man was the opposite. And you couldn't tell if he was a rock or a person. This is Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And this was his state all the time, not just once or twice. The third example, I'll end with it, is the example of Imam al-Bukhari. So it is reported in the books that Imam al-Bukhari, one time he was praying, and he was attacked by a school of bees or bumblebees. One of them, I forgot now, maybe bumblebees. And, Imam al-Bukhari felt the stinging and stuff, but he didn't want to exit the prayer. And he kept going. And when he exited the prayer finally, or when he finished the prayer, he counted how many stings he got. And I think he counted 16 or 17 different things. So he took all of that. But again, the point is, sometimes when you are so much into something, you enjoy it so much, you don't even feel the pain, or if you feel it, it's not as much, because your mind is somewhere else and you are taken by that experience, so you don't feel the pain that you usually would feel. But these are examples from our past, and we have other examples, but I thought those were interesting because they may be a bit extreme, I think, but they are good examples of when you are, especially salat. Salat is so special, so unique. I don't believe any other religion or any other culture have this concept of salat. If you speak about salat to other people, they think, oh, it's about making dua or supplication, or you're invoking God or something like that. But this actual, salat that you do every time, every day, 5 times a day, and you take that time at least, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and it's a mix of invocations, incantations, whatever you call it, and movements, and these pillars we talked about. It's a unique, it's a unique thing. So let us, inshallah, preserve it as much as possible, improve it, and try to make it better, and make it an enjoyable experience, inshallah. That's all I have.
Can you please, I missed the last one about the Imam al-Bukhari. What happened with him?
So he was attacked by these bumblebees. In Arabic, call it like in our version, we say dabbur. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
Dabbur?
Same, yeah.
Yes.
So,
Can somebody throw me a bottle of water? Nothing.
as we know in the hadith that the person is closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they are in sajda.
No.
And so, when you're doing dua in sajda, I have two questions basically. One is it permissible to do a dua in sajda when you are doing the fard salah? And the second one is, how should one go about doing the dua if he was to ask for something?
In my opinion, and not my personal opinion, but I follow the opinion that yes, it is okay. And sometimes you can make a dua from the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There are many, right? Now, obviously, in nafil salat, in a voluntary salat, you have more time usually, because in the mandatory salat, especially if you are in jama'ah, especially if you are leading the salat, you're not supposed to make it too long, because there are a lot of people behind you, and some people might be in a hurry, or they might be sick, or they could be old, or maybe too young. So it's important to be considerate of all the people behind you. So this is why we don't make it too long. But if it is a voluntary prayer, whether you pray at home or even in jama'ah, like in Ramadan, for example, in Taraweeh, some people complain that some imams are too long. They take too long in tahajjud. Well, yeah, tahajjud is about praying a long prayer. If you cannot take it, you don't have to pray tahajjud. It's not mandatory on you. But you cannot ask everybody to speed up their salat because you cannot pray long prayer. So those are the time where we take time to make dua. So then you can make all the dua you want. So really there's no restriction. I mean, the hadith says it is the time to make dua, and Allah will answer, or it's a time where Allah will hear you and listen to your dua. But there's no specification on what kind of dua. But if you're worried about, because some people may make some dua and usually it could have some kind of, the Prophet mentioned alayhi salam ta'addi fi dua. So it could have some, what is the right word? Ta'addi is like you're going overboard in making dua, right? So you might be violating dua. So if you want to stay within the dua in the Quran and Sunnah, it's safer, right? Because some people do not know how to make dua properly, or they may, violate the etiquettes of dua.
In Surah, you say Ba'ad al-Fatiha. Does the length matter?
No, not at all. I mean, some people might be surprised, but you don't even have to recite a surah after Fatiha, because like you said, it's a sunnah, so it is not wajib. So even if you don't recite anything, and I'm talking about the first two rak'ah, your salat is still proper, still valid, but you lose some reward, because obviously you recite an extra surah or another surah, because you will earn some reward. So if you don't do that, you will miss some of the ajr, but your salat is proper. Which means that if you recite a small surah, it's fine. If you recite a long surah, it's fine. And a lot of people don't know this. It's mentioned in Bukhari that one of the Sahaba used to say Surah Al-Ikhlas after the surah he recites usually. In fact, he would even recite it in the third or fourth rak'ah. And some people asked, like, why do you, they complained about him in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet asked them, like, why do you recite Surah Al-Ikhlas in those times? I mean, it's not the time that people think you should recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. And the man says, simply because I love the surah and it has a beautiful description of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ approved it. He said, great, this is a great reason. So yeah, you can recite any length of any surah, part of the surah or a full surah, long surah, short surah, no surah, it's all good.
I mean like, do you get more reward for the sunnah if you recite a long surah, and you get less reward for the sunnah?
Yes, this is the definition of sunnah, yes, that you get more reward, and obviously you get the reward of reciting the Quran. So the more you recite, the more reward you get, because you get a reward for every letter you recite. So yes, if you recite a longer surah, it means you recited more verses and more words and more letters. So yes, you'll get more.
One thing I wanted to ask was regarding when you're praying Salah, and it's not just memorization, but also understanding what you're saying. If you don't understand what you're saying, is there a penalty for that, or is it more or less like depending on your recitation?
No, I mean, it's not a penalty, but obviously, and this is I'm glad you brought this up, because definitely this is important to accomplish khushu'. So if somebody recites Quran or whatever you recite in sujood or ruku', and you have no clue what it means, it's not going to have the same effect as if you knew what it meant. And this is also why I didn't mention that, but also something that helps our experience, our khushu' in salat, is to always change the dua we make. So for example, and I know some people are hung or stuck on their own madhab. So for example, if Hanafi and your dua is, istiftah, the beginning of the salat, you might say Subhanallah wa bihamdik, all that. And then if you're Shafi'i, you might say wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawat. If you're Hanbali, you might say Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khataya kama ba'adta bayna al-mashriq wal-maghrib. And I think the good recommendation is to actually alternate. Because what happens, and this is, by the way, scientific, because you're going to be on autopilot. If you keep saying the same dua, imagine somebody who's been saying the same dua all their lives, like for 40 years, 50 years, been saying the exact same dua. You're going to be on autopilot when you say it. But whenever you do something a little different, your mind wakes up. Like last time you recited wajjahtu wajhi, this time you recited Allahumma ba'id bayni wa bayna khataya. Now you're paying attention to it because you're not used to it. You did something different. So this is a recommendation that you, anytime you have an opportunity to change something in salat, do. Especially if it is all coming from the sunnah. All of that is from the sunnah of the Prophet. Like you're not doing anything from your own. So this is important to alternate those things, right? But yes, understanding what you recite definitely improves the experience of salat. And this can come, with time. You may not know everything, like especially the Quran, right? But definitely you should know the meaning of Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. What is the difference between Azim and A'la, right? So Azim is about greatness, right? A'la is about highness. And so on, like what does it mean to say Sami'a Allahu liman hamida? Do you know even the meaning of these words? That Allah is not just hearing you, because Sami'a also means that He's responding to you. Because the word Sami'a has different meaning. So when you learn these things, right, it definitely improves the experience of salat. And then yes, when it comes to Quran, obviously it's a little harder because now if the Imam is reciting a long surah, you may not understand everything. Especially this happens in Ramadan because you're listening to the entire Quran. So no one is going to be able to, even most Arab people don't even understand Arabic, believe me. But even if they understood the basic words like sama, aradin, or jibal, they understand those things. They still may not get the full meaning of the verse, or especially if the verse is talking about something a little bit complicated, like some rules and stuff. So it is always good to improve your understanding of the Quran, like you're reading tafsir or reading any commentary or translation. Yeah. Yes.
I have two questions. First is it allowed to make dua in other language than Arabic during the when you're making like sujood? And I wanted to come to the story that you were sharing about the first companion. Would it be like an obligation to break your salah if your life is in danger?
Okay, so two things. As far as using a different language, the opinion I follow is that it's better not to. So, because salat is, there are two types of worship. So there's the worship which is like tawqifi, we say. Tawqifi means there's no place of logic in it or reasoning. I cannot reason why this is so. I cannot reason why it's 4 rak'ah, not 3. I cannot reason why we, for example, we wipe the top of the feet, a hoof, right, and not the bottom. So there's no place of reasoning. These are like pure ritualistic acts of worship. In those cases, I wouldn't change much. So one difference, for example, if you look at Friday prayer, so we would say, not everybody, but many scholars would say, that the khutbah is not purely ritualistic. And we understand what, the meaning of the khutbah is to, preach to people, it is to admonish people, it is to remind people. So the reason is very well understood. So there's more leeway, there's more flexibility. This is why it's okay to say the khutbah in English. But the prayer is purely ritualistic. And in that sense, I would refrain from using other languages. But you might find some scholars who might allow it. Imam Abu Hanifa might be the more flexible in this area. For example, if somebody couldn't say Fatiha, because some people can't. I mean, somebody just became a Muslim, right? It's really hard, super hard for them to learn Arabic and to learn Fatiha immediately, right? I know when I was young, I used to have that opinion, like you have to recite Fatiha as soon as you become a Muslim and all that. So it's not feasible that everybody could do that. So for example, Imam Abu Hanifa says, in those cases, you can say short tasbih. So you cannot say, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, all the way to the end. It might be easier for you to learn to say Subhanallah or Alhamdulillah or Allah Akbar. And you say that just to fill in the space. And that should be enough. But other imams are more strict when it comes to salat, that it has to be in Arabic and it has to be exactly as it is prescribed. But any time outside the prayer, you can make dua in any language, obviously. Oh, there was a second?
I was just referring back to the story of the companion that you shared on the first.
Oh yeah, so if there is a threat of life, yes, but maybe that companion, I mean, those people were not, fragile like we are today. So I guess in his case, he did not think that it was a threat to his life, that he could take it, he could, And I know now we freak out if you see a drop of blood coming out of your nose or out of your leg or something. But those people were much stronger. And you know how they used to, treat it, right? Have you heard of cautery? Like they cauterize, like they basically bring a hot iron and they put it right on the wound, and you probably smell your flesh, burning. But it will basically stop the bleeding immediately. So.
I wanted to ask about two situations I usually encounter that affect the quality of my salah. They are not internal. I believe you mostly covered the internal parts which are far more important. not uncommon to, it could be the end of the day, I've been working all day, and I'm exhausted, and it's a matter of time. It's only like 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and I know for sure if I do it, it will not be good, because I'm really exhausted. So, what I'm following is, I'll just rest for a little bit, even if I miss the timing, and do it probably. I think this is a better way.
So you're talking about like مثلا Asr until after Maghrib enters?
For example, I know because, and I have this internal conflict because I know there's like hadith when the Prophet, peace be upon him, in Banu Qurayza, when he said, in a different battle.
In the Battle of Khandaq,
When he
Yeah,
made dua upon them because they made him miss Asr or.
he prayed all four at the end, I think, something like that, at the
Yeah.
very end of the day. Yes.
So I know the timing is
But
really.
he said شغلونا عن الصلاة الوسطى
Yeah.
ملأ الله قبورهم نارا, something like that.
Exactly. So, what I get from these hadiths that the timing is really important. You didn't get to mess with it, but at the same time, I understand that physical circumstances can affect the quality of the salah. So this is my first question.
Can we do that first so I don't forget?
Sure.
And then you can tell
Yeah,
me.
please.
So these are like few things that are important, I think. Yes, we want to make sure that we are fully present when we pray, because if you're totally tired, exhausted, you're not going to be able to give your salat as much attention. But there is here something which is, like especially we're talking about the mandatory prayers, so those you don't want to miss regardless. Now obviously there are some concessions, like we can combine Dhuhr and Asr. So for example, if you're tired at Dhuhr time and you said I'm going to delay until Asr time, that's totally fine, because then you can combine. It's just that when it is about Asr time, you cannot delay that until after Maghrib. It's like a dead, like this is a drop dead type of situation, right? You cannot extend that time. Likewise, you can extend the time of Maghrib to the time of Isha. That's also another, opportunity to combine the prayers. So you just watch for those like unallowed, you cannot take the time of Asr into the time of Maghrib. This is like a definite separation between those two times. But since you mentioned that, it's, Islam has given attention to those things. Like, why do you think the Prophet ﷺ said, لا صلاة في حضرة طعام ولا وهو يدافع الأخبثان? He said, there is no prayer in times when food is brought to you. Now, again, this somebody brought you dinner right at Maghrib time, you haven't prayed Asr, pray Asr first. But in all of the cases, the majority of the cases, they will fine, and they should, in fact, eat first. There's another hadith that says, إذا حضر العشاء, I'm sure all of us know this, إذا حضر العشاء فقدموا العشاء على العشاء. If dinner was brought, right, and it's the time of Isha, then eat first, and then pray Isha. In fact, it is also recommended to delay Isha a little bit. The Sahaba used to always delay Isha, the Prophet as well. In fact, it is narrated that the companions would sit in the masjid waiting for Isha, and they would fall asleep, like when they're sitting like this, they would fall asleep like that, waiting for Isha. Because they would not pray on time, they would delay Isha. Until later. Not too much later, like till the third of the night at most. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ gave attention to the state of the body. Like if you are hungry and the food, you're anticipating food is coming, you're not going to be able to focus on salat. So that's why you eat first. You take your mind away from all the, you're thinking about the pie and the chicken, whatever. So all of that is taken care of. It's out of the way. Now you can focus on the prayer. And the other example is when you have to use a restroom. You should not like fight, like, you want to use the restroom, but you say, no, I'm going to pray first. I don't want to miss the first rak'ah. So you come to the prayer, and you're fighting the urge to use the restroom, right? All the time. You're not going to be able to focus on the salat, on the prayer. Because all the time you're thinking, I can wait a bit more, I can fight it. You're not focused on the prayer. So those cases, you basically take care of yourself, take care of your need, and then you pray. You pray while your mind is focused on salat. You empty your mind so that it is focused on salat. So those are examples where the Prophet ﷺ gave us. And likewise, if you're tired but you still have time, you can take a nap and then pray. The only thing is, if it's like too close to Maghrib, in that case, it's better to pray because you don't want to totally miss the salat. And this is why, subhanAllah, salat is not like a specific time. It's not like either you pray at the top of the hour or you miss it. No, you have a window of time, usually, right? You have Dhuhr, you have like maybe 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes, right? And Asr, you have 3 hours or something. So it's always a window of time. So inshallah, always you should have that, you should have time to take care of your needs before you pray, inshallah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. My
Yeah,
second one. It's not as common as the first one, which is fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
It's urgency.
Okay.
I only encountered it 2 times. One of them, I had an exam. It was a 9-hour exam, with only 1 hour as a break,
Mm-hmm.
and you usually want to like chunk them into like 10 minutes or so. And it started 9 a.m., finished 5 p.m. or so, almost at Maghrib time. I was back in Asia. So another situation like this, which I was in OR assisting in an operation,
Mm-hmm.
and it took a lot of time, included entire time of, I can't remember, Asr or Zuhr.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in situations like this? It's very urgent. I know it's dunya, but still it's very, very urgent. And I get a sense from the combining thing that you shortly mentioned. I didn't know actually that it is permissible to combine two salat until one of my sheikh, and I was very surprised to know it. And he told me this hadith is like one of the very correct ones that almost everyone choose to ignore it, because a lot of people might abuse it or misuse it, which is, it is actually permissible to combine salahs, specific salahs like Dhuhr and Asr,
Mm-hmm.
rather than Isha,
Yeah.
even if you're not traveling. So
Correct.
I want to hear your opinion.
No. Yeah, I mean, actually combining the prayer, I know it's not very common in some madhab, but it's rather like very authentic actually from the Prophet
Yeah.
ﷺ. And it's mentioned in few occasions, not just when you travel, but there are cases. For example, rain is definitely mentioned in the hadith. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ told us that, if you're anticipating like rain and you pray Dhuhr, you can pray Asr. Because you're not going to be able to come back to the masjid, right? So rain is one. Another one is sickness. Like, so it's really hard for you to make wudu for every prayer and stuff. So then you combine the prayers. So sickness, or it's hard for you to even get up and pray, like even bed, for example. So sickness is another. So we mentioned travel, sickness, and rain. And then they say any kind of like real dire haja. Like you mentioned, for example, doing an operation on a person. Like it's not a situation where you can just leave, right? So someone's life is in your hand, right? So you have to take care of it. So that's obviously clear. And we have to distinguish between different urgencies. So like taking an exam is not as bad or it's not as urgent as like a attending someone.
Sometimes it is.
Okay, but like the guy could die, right? If you
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, of course.
So you're not gonna. Hopefully, you're not gonna die if you go fast. Well, maybe your father kills you or something. um, but as you said, so those are valid cases for combining salat. And some people may not know this, but one time Ibn Abbas, in order just to prove that combining is okay, because some people were even, at the time of the Prophet, some people were not sure. One time, I think he was giving a dars, like a halaqa, and he combined. So the point is, as you said, the point is you don't make it a habit. Because you don't want to get to a point where, like some people do, not Sunni Muslims, they always combine Dhuhr and Asr, they always combine Maghrib and Isha. In fact, some claim that there's only 3 times, not 5 times of prayer, but they combine. So you don't want to like get to that point where we no longer recognize Dhuhr time versus Asr time. So those are definitely 2 times, but there are occasions, not common, but special occasions where you might have to combine Dhuhr and Asr. And it's really up to your judgment. I mean, everybody knows if the situation you're in is urgent or not.
Okay, so can I ask about a specific situation? For example, if I'm working, start at 9 a.m. and I finish around 6 or 7 p.m. and I only get 1 hour break at lunchtime, which is usually Dhuhr time. Is this considered okay to combine Asr with Dhuhr at
You
Dhuhr?
can, but is it going to be every day?
Yeah. My question is, can it be a habit? Because again, I will be mostly at that time, except for my day off, I'll be working. Which I know
Your
you
situation
can take
seems
a
to be
break.
very personal. Maybe we can have a discussion.
Okay, sure. I'm sorry.
But in general, you don't want to make it a habit. But there could be some extreme cases where there's no way you can take. I mean, nowadays, most jobs I know, you speak to the manager or whatever, the boss, they let you usually. So if that doesn't work and you can't live without that job, like you're gonna be on the street, right? Because you need to make money. Then of course, I mean, Islam doesn't make your life, impossible. So yeah, of course you can do those things. But if I say it's okay, then if somebody hears it and they go and do it
Yes.
every day. So that's why I'm careful. But yeah, no, absolutely. If it is a genuine, legitimate excuse, right, reason, justification, then yeah, it's fine. So if you look, for example, at the situation where the Prophet ﷺ was digging the trench, so that was also, so he was preoccupied with that. Also because if he left it, the enemy could have come, right? So he was taken away from the prayer, not 2, but 4 prayers. So he had to pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha at once at the end of the night, or like later at night. But that was one time, right? But it showed that the Prophet ﷺ did that because there was an urgency, or you could say emergency in that case.
Emergency. That's my-
Yes.
Okay, so like when you said that the one that they used to get hot metal and put it on their wounds because it would stop the bleeding, I remember my dad once told me about like when people were sick, they used to, what do you call it? I know it sounds really weird, but they used to drink camel pee, right?
Yeah. Well, there is a hadith in Bukhari that it used to be not just that, but the milk and I think Yaq mentioned milk, and it also mentioned urine of the camels. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, back then it was something
They had no medicine.
not like the one we have today. Advil, for example. It's very good. But yeah, I mean, subhanAllah, even like sometimes something that might have worked back then doesn't have to work now. We don't know how their bodies adjusted to those things and how it reacted to those things. But obviously, it was all based on experience back then. I mean, there was no like medical testing or anything like that. It was based on experience. If something worked for a while, they would make it. They would take it as a medicine.
Okay.
And sometimes it might have to do with, like, if you're from that region or not from that region. That also mattered, right? So I mean, just like now, I think they say if you take from the honey of the place you live in, like the local honey, it has a better effect on you. Like it heals you better than having honey from a different state or something like that. So it seems like those things might have some validity. You're not tired yet?
Jazakallah
So it'll be fine. You can ask away more questions. Me, what's up? Time?
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. Anything else? And 3, 2, all.
I'll say one. Do you have any tips or advice on kind of linking, I guess like the knowledge of like knowing that, like the importance of Salah and having khushu' in Salah, and also like you know how important it is. You know it's a beautiful thing, right? It's like the perception you were speaking about earlier. But even then, when you know that, it's like the motivation, you know, to want to try to have khushu'. Right? It's like,
Yeah, we kind of hinted to it. I don't think we emphasized it enough. But for example, when I said that salat is like a sila, it's like a connection between you and Allah. Obviously, that's something important, right? Like you want that, right? But yeah, I mean, for example, maybe a better example of what you said is to think of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, it's impossible to mention all the hadith about salat. I might have mentioned like few, I don't know, a couple dozen maybe. I don't know how many I mentioned. If you look at the totality of the hadith narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, the number one topic that is covered in hadith is salat. Like you'll find much more hadith about salat than any other topic. So one hadith about that is أول ما يحاسب عليه العبد يوم القيامة الصلاة. For example, the first thing that a person will be asked about on the day of judgment, and yuhasab is like you're reckoned, like you're being questioned about, is salat. فإذا صلحت صلح سائر عمله. If it's good, then the rest of your acts or actions will be good. If not, then not. So that speaks to the importance of the prayer. If you perceive that, okay, this is the number one thing that I'm going to be asked about on the day of judgment, and if it's good, then it's going to make the rest of my actions good. Obviously, that's really, very important. So yes, that would translate, hopefully, to more attention in the prayer, to more khushu' in the prayer, all of that. Good point.